Hello, and welcome to the Brand Therapist Podcast with your host, Yamilka Rodriguez. I am super excited about today's solo podcast. We're going to talk about how do you start your outline for your book. Okay, I've done a few books myself, and it took me a while to figure this out, although I knew what to do because this is what I do for a living. Sometimes, as they say, you can't do surgery on yourself as a surgeon. So that's a really good analogy as what we're going to talk about. But once you learn the theory and understand it, writing the outline for your book is going to be super simple, because one of the premises of what I do is to get deep into the understanding of your client as well as your superfan. The more we understand our own character, the better we can serve our clients. Just like on the airplane, right? They say, put the mask on yourself first before you put it on your child. Well, it's the same concept. The better you know you and your brand, the better you're going to be able to serve your clients. And one of the important things, at least for me, when I serve my clients, is to really get to know them deeply so I can understand, what they're looking for, what their ideals are, right? What their barriers are as well, what their pain points are. And the more you go deep into understanding your client, the easier it is to create stuff for them. So I do a lot of logos and websites. And once I get to know them, we really focus on that message, on that design, on that visual that represents them as an individual. A lot of people don't use this theory, but psychology is everything. Everything is based on psychology. Everything you touch, everything you do. Why? Because we're human beings, and human beings are prone to really use or do things in a certain way based on, how they think, how they do things. And we do things in a very particular way because we are humans. I've been watching this Netflix. I'm kind of been looking at it. Watching the whole thing, binging. It's called White Collar. And it's, FBI investigations, and this con artist really is great at reading people. And that's how he does a lot of his thefts or, things like that. But that is so critical, not on the bad side of things. Now he's trying to help, the FBI solve crimes. But what really is using that to understand yourself and your client so then you can grow your business. But now let's go back into, how do we write an outline for our book? Well, all this is important for this, okay? So once you have an outline, everything else is easy. What's hard is to know what you're writing about and what the outline is. And I'm going to give you all the little tricks and tips. We're going to look at archetypes and how we use them within the stories, but this is called the 12 steps to story. Once you know these 12 steps, you're not going to ever watch a movie again and not know what's going to happen, because these are the 12 steps that they do to tell stories and to write movies. But the first thing we got to do is really understand, what is our book about? What do we want to tell the story about? Is it an adventure story? Is it a love story? Is it a comedy story? Is it a romance novel? Is it a drama? So you got to figure out, first of all, how you want to position your story. The second piece is, what are the cast of characters, right? If you're a character in the story, right, you're the main character, what is your characteristics? So you have to write them down. So if you're a hero, then you want to write the hero characteristics down. If you're a lover, you want to write the lover characteristics down. But then you also want to cast your superfan, because you want to talk to your superfan. So if you're a lover, your superfan is an explorer. If you're a caregiver, your superfan is a hero. So you want to really think about and write all the characteristics of that individual. Once you have a couple, and you can look at your secondary and look at your secondary super fan and look at all those, and you should have at least 5 or 6 different cast of characters. You don't have to use the archetypes for this, but it's easier. And we're trying to make this easy for you. So if you cast a character, write their characteristics and define them and talk about who they are. That's the second piece. Then we're going to write the role of you in the story, right? Is this story about you? Which your first book should always be about you. Is this story about somebody else? Is this a how-to book? What is your goal that you're trying to accomplish with this book? I think sometimes it's too early to write a book title right from the get-go. You can kind of brainstorm on book titles, but don't get caught up in book titles. So you can have that. But the first thing we do, the first step, step number 1 for story is the ordinary world. This is where the challenge comes, right? So where does the character regularly experience lack of control, worry, boredom, and anguish? Every time you see a movie, you see them in their ordinary world, what their world is like. And then the second one is the call to adventure. They always get a call like, do this, do that, try this, go here. So when the ordinary world is no longer acceptable because you are done with your past, the character, whether it's you or not, is ripe for change. So they're ready to change. So we need to find and understand what those triggers are, what happens to them. Why do they decide to go for the change? The third one is refusal to the call. So you can always see in movies like they feel that the call is important, but then they say, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to take it. I'm not going to move forward. I want to stay here in the ordinary world. It always happens that way. It's the struggle to change in the transition. So this is when the character is uncertain and they want to avoid the call. They identify with what's holding them back. So you need to identify that and see how you can make them, what is it that is going to want them to move on and move forward? And we'll talk about these as chapters. So the first one, The Ordinary World, can be chapter 1. The Call to Adventure can be chapter 2. The Refusal to the Call can be chapter 3. And number 4, the chapter 4 is Meeting a Mentor. So this is where you may want to start talking about your understanding, your knowledge, how you support, how you spur people forward. But the goal here is to provide wisdom and knowledge and comfort and reassurance. So when you meet the mentor, they really need to provide this reassurance that it's possible. So the mentor doesn't necessarily need to be the character. Maybe it's somebody else who comes in and helps you out, or you figure it out. So it's how you define this mentor. Okay, chapter 5 is crossing the first threshold. And these need to be steps, right? So when the character begins to feel uncomfortable, scared, or just simply bored. So the goal here is to guide them to a major event, right? This is the most important, an event, an achievement that will delight your audience, and that it also helps them to continue on the adventure. So that's crossing the first threshold. So on chapter number 6, test your allies and enemies. So when the character feels great stress, anxiety to continue, is tempted to just quit, but finds people, things they can help. Like if you think about when you started your business, right? And you were maybe 6 months in or a year in sometimes, and you were like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, this is not working. What am I doing wrong? You feel stressed, you feel anxious, you don't know how to continue. So these are tests that you will encounter and find out who your allies are and who your enemies are, right? In some movies, you can see that some are supposedly your allies, but they really are not. So you're really trying to figure out who are they and who they are not. So the important thing here is to at least have 3 trials and challenges that get in the way of your goal. And so how do you help the audience through to surprise and delight the encounter along the way? Chapter 7 is the cave, where the character glimpses the dark side of the true hidden self and always is denied for most of their life, that they've always denied, right? That hidden thing that you put away, that you don't want to talk about, that you deny it, that you don't really come through with it. So the goal here is the emotional transformation occurs. This is where the shifts happen. The direction of the story happens. It's really important to really look at that emotional transformation piece to then use that to shift the direction of the story. The bigger the shift, the better. Now we go to chapter number 8, which is the supreme ordeal. This is where you kind of master your goal. This is where your character attempts to use the parts of your true self, or of your deeper true self. You identify what you have achieved and what you really want, right? We think we want something, and that's what your story should tell at the beginning. We think we wanted this, but actually we got so much more. And so this is the supreme ordeal, is where you identify that true nature, that true piece of yourself that you really had hidden within you. Then we go to chapter 9, which is the reward. When the character slowly discovers a new passion and begins to feel steady daily glow from harnessing the power of their true self. So you've discovered something new. You figured out what you are truly about. This is the true reward, right? You've mastered something that you really know you were going to master. And this is the reward, the new passion that you slowly discover. And it's really something deep within you, right? That true transformation piece. But we're not done yet, because there's 12 steps. So step number 10 is the road back. This is what we call the consistency, the piece where we continually want to maintain what we've discovered. This is where the character has a newfound passion and returns to the demands of their ordinary life. So this is really tricky. So what happens is you found out through maybe starting your business that you were doing, let's say you were doing logos, or you were doing marketing for individuals. As you were working on that and working with your clients, you found that you had a deeper meaning, that you could help them at a deeper level. And maybe you started coaching them on their true essence, on their capabilities, on what they were able to do, on more of a spiritual kind of lens. And so, how do they take that back into their ordinary world? It's really hard. Like you've kind of got through this transformation and now you're going to go back to who you were before. So, how do you maintain, right, that passion? And so, identifying and helping the audience connect the dots, even after the thought of the reward. So, how do you help them connect the dots on the story that you're telling them? Like, what are the things that you're going to do different now? What is the path to your own discovery? How are you going to make changes? Because that's the true transformation. So, when we go to chapter 11, is the resurrection. This is where the character glimpse into his or hers impending death. What have I done with my life? And examines themselves. So this is just a piece where they're like trying to figure themselves out. They kind of have a shift in their perspective and they can see the end and they can see the things that they had done in their lives. And they're really examining every single piece of it. So, as we were telling the story of being a business owner or whatever, you can think about what have I really done and where have I done things that didn't make sense and it wasn't true to yourself. So really thinking about, okay, I really got to come to who I am, to my true self. And actually, as I read this, I'm thinking about a lot of things about what's happened in my life and really thinking about how do I then unapologetically go into the new direction of where my path is guiding me, of my true self. So the last chapter is the return with the elixir, which is all about your legacy. It's about what do you want to leave behind? What is the impact you want to make? And so this is where the character, who, if it's you or somebody else or whoever you want it to be, wants to help and give younger people and share their story about their ordinary world. This is where I was when I started this journey, and this is where I got. Because a lot of people will be able to connect to your story. I've been reading the book, The Magic, which is the author who did Eat, Pray, Love. And she was talking about that when she wrote her book, she was writing for herself because she had gone through this huge transformation with Eat, Pray, Love. She never thought Eat, Pray, Love was going to be a bestseller. That's not why she wrote the book. And that's a really good point. You should always not think about the end goal of the book, but more of what you want to portray and the courage that you want to leave behind and the impact you want to leave behind in those books. So you tell, your story, your life, and through that, you hope that other people will connect with it. It's not about hoping, but somebody will connect with it. And she was talking about how 12 million people connected with her. So, that wasn't her goal, but it happens. People connect with your story and it helps others and it helps leave an impact for other people. And so share your experiences. Identify the greater realization to the true reward. Remember that on chapter 9, you told them what your reward was, which is not the supreme ordeal, but the actual reward that you got from your experience. But then on chapter 12, you need to tell them what the true reward is, which might be around sharing your life story with others, helping others through their own adventure so they can realize things of themselves, right? So that is how you write an outline for your book using archetypes and the 12 steps to story. It's pretty magical when you use this. You know, the first time I wrote my book, I actually wasn't using the 12 steps, but at the end, before I decided to wrap it up, I did use it. And it was so amazing how easy it was to write the chapters when you start to go through this transformation piece. You know, one of the 12 steps of story really comes from Joseph Campbell. He is incredible. So if you ever get a chance to read one of Joseph Campbell's books, you're going to see how amazing he was at explaining and telling people how to write stories. My other idol, as all of you know, is Jung, and or Jung, however you want to pronounce that. And what is amazing about the psychology of Carl Jung is that he really tested himself in each of those. And if you haven't read the Red Book, it's a real introspective of who he was and how he used himself as a test to really explain the things that we all live through. And it's a really exciting and interesting book to really think about yourself. And as you write your first book, second book, third book, or fourth book, and using these steps, think about what's the deeper piece that's happening within you and how you can bring that deeper piece out into the world. And maybe you don't know what each piece is really going to be about, but going through the prompts, maybe it reveals something for you, or you find something that you didn't think of as you were looking at this. And the other piece is when you think about writing a book and using this step, think about your character, you know, really define the characters because that's what really good stories do. And use the character as part of your tone of voice. So if you're the lover, you know, think about, you know, moments that you found passion or delight, or you know, that you were really crying, emotional elements, you know, connection, relationships. Those are the most important things for a lover. And then think about the opposite, you know, explore, think about adventures or telling adventures of friends of yours or adventures that you fulfilled yourself as you were growing, because we grow into our secondary, and that tension is really important. So as we go into our secondary and understanding our secondary, which is our super fan a little bit more, really helps us be more whole and really tap into those individuals that are going to love everything that we stand for and that we do. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this. And as we end this, I'm going to go through the 12 of them really quickly so you remember them. And if you want to have the prompts, and you text me at yamilka@bespokebranding.io, I will personally send you the prompts. But here we go. The ordinary world, the call to adventure, the refusal to the call, meeting the mentor, crossing the first threshold, right? That's when the story gets exciting. Test allies and enemies, the cave, the supreme ordeal, the reward, the road back, the resurrection, and 12, the return to the elixir. So there you go. And thank you so much for being with me today. I'm happy to answer any further questions. please let me know on the comments, and I would happy to answer anything that you have. So I can't wait to see you write your first, second, or third book using this methodology. And thank you for being with me on the Brand Therapist podcast, and I'll see you on the next one.